At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
This episode is brought to you by Pluto TV. Are you looking for your next case? Pluto TV has all your favorite crime dramas streaming for free, which means suspicion is free, with countless cases to crack. Watch CSI, Criminal Minds, NCIS, Blue Bloods, Tracker, FBI, and SWAT, all for free from all your favorite devices. Feel the free. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
This podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care of yourself.
Get into the early life of Vernon Brown. Well, I'll tell you, Vernon Brown was born on October 1st, 1953 in Indianapolis, Indiana, the oldest of 5 children. His mother was 15 years old when he was born, and he never knew his father. Vernon was raised in poverty, was physically and sexually abused, and may have been the product of an incestuous relationship between his grandfather and his mother.
Yeah. There's no confirmation that that's true, but that's a rumor.
Yeah.
That has been said.
Yeah.
Because his mother was often not around, Vernon was largely reared by his grandparents. His grandfather, George, was stern and abusive, reportedly sexually molesting and severely beating Vernon throughout his youth.
According to his later clemency application, quote, Vernon was chained naked and beaten with a switch, a belt, a buggy whip, and a bull whip. This abuse left a trail of welts and bruises. When anyone in the family protested this treatment, George tied Vernon to a bed and severely beat him yet again, unquote.
That's terrible.
Just terror upon terror, violence upon violence. Like, it just sounds like a house of horrors.
Awful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Vernon's difficult childhood was further complicated by a head injury that he endured at a young age. According to his later attorney, he had a low IQ and suffered from severe headaches and memory lapses.
Now, at the age of 16, Vernon dropped out of high school and tried to enlist in the Army, but was rejected. In 1973, when he was 19 or 20, he sexually assaulted a 12-year-old girl, for which he spent 4 years in prison.
According to his younger brother, Darius, Vernon was caring and protective towards him when they were children, but he changed after spending time in prison.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
So let's get into the timeline. On August 25th, 1980, shortly after Brown's release from prison, the body of a 9-year-old girl named Kimberly Campbell was found in a house owned by Brown's grandmother. The little girl had been tied up, beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death.
Brown had been seen with Kimberly on August 24th, but without any solid evidence, no indictment was filed. A year later, Brown was charged with molesting an 11-year-old boy and 3 girls aged 9, 7, and 2. Yeah. Warrants were issued for his arrest, and he promptly skipped town.
He often drifted around the country and worked odd jobs until he eventually settled in St. Louis, Missouri, where he married a woman that he met there. A few years later, while still married to his wife,
His first wife,
he married somebody else named Kathy Moore under the alias Tommy Turner.
Yeah, he never bothered to get a divorce or anything, and I don't know what happened with the first wife, but yeah.
Okay, well.
Yeah, that's what happened. In 1985, Brown was living in an apartment on Washington Avenue in St. Louis with Kathy. Brown worked as a maintenance worker at the apartment complex that they lived in, and he also worked next door at a restaurant called the Grand Cafe as a dishwasher.
Sometime after February 13th, 1985, Brown and Kathy moved with Kathy's 3 young boys to a house on Enright Avenue, about a mile away from the apartment complex. A few days later, Sonetta Ford, 19, moved into a basement apartment of the complex on Washington with her friend, Alicia Brown, no relation to Vernon Brown. But Alicia Brown was pregnant.
On February 23rd or 24th in 1985, Alicia, Sonetta, and a man named Earl Bedford and Vernon Brown played cards together in Alicia and Sonetta's apartment. Earl later testified that Brown flirted with Sonetta, but she wasn't interested.
On February 28th, 1985, Alicia checked into a hospital for about 10 days due to complications with her pregnancy. Prior to her admission into the hospital, Alicia had discussed with Brown the possibility of him working on their apartment rug and event.
Brown went to Alicia and Sonetta's apartment to take up the rug on March 2nd and then the 4th, but Sonetta told him to wait until Alicia came back from the hospital. On March 5th, Sonetta called her friend Vicki Noland. She was speaking very fast, and she asked Vicki to, quote, "Come get me now," unquote.
God.
Yeah.
Sonetta told Vicki that she was afraid because she had come home to find Brown hanging out on the stairway near the entrance of her apartment. Vicki picked Sonetta up at about 2:35 p.m., and she spent the night with her. The last time Vicki saw Sonetta was when Sonetta left for work on the morning shift at Victor Foods at about 4:30 a.m. the next morning.
Alicia's brother Anthony worked with Sonetta at Victor Foods. Anthony last saw Sonetta on Wednesday, March 6, 1985, between 3:30 p.m. and 3:45 p.m. at work. He later testified that she told him about her encounter with Brown.
On March 7th, at 10:30 a.m., Brown arrived at the Grand Cafe and told a chef that he was sick and did not want to work. The chef told him to go home and come back the next day if he felt better.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, bye.
On March 8th at about 4 p.m., so it's the next day,
Okay.
Alicia was picked up from the hospital by Earl Bedford. When they arrived at her apartment, which she shared with Sonetta, they found that the door to the apartment had been shattered from the frame.
From the frame is a lot.
Yeah.
Now, when they entered the apartment, they saw Sonetta's body on the floor with a knife sticking out of her throat and an electrical cord from a curling iron tightly knotted around the neck. They ran out and called the police.
A later autopsy that was performed indicated that Sonetta died from strangulation and that she had been stabbed twice, once in the chest and once in the neck.
People, including Brown, began to gather at the front of the apartment building. Brown asked Alicia what happened, and she replied that she had found her roommate dead. Brown appeared surprised.
What?
Yeah, Brown.
She's dead?
Brown, get out of here. If it's Brown, flush it down. Just flush him down the toilet.
Brown was interviewed by the police at the crime scene. He told them that he moved out of the apartment building where Sonetta lived 3 weeks earlier, but that he still received mail there. He told them that when he stopped by to pick up some mail at about 10:15 a.m. on March 7th, he heard Sonetta arguing with a Cuban man.
Brown gave the police a description of the purported Cuban man. Police had him help come up with a composite picture of the man, and it went faster than usual. According to the police, it doesn't usually happen that way.
Yeah, it often takes a long time because the person will say that the nose isn't right or the eyes aren't right, requiring more work. But not so with Brown. He was just like, yep, that's right.
Yep, you got it. Yep, officer, that's him.
And that made police suspicious.
Yeah.
They then gave him a polygraph, which he did not pass, putting him at the top of the suspect list.
In the 90s, these were the tools that they used and the best that they, I guess, had at the time. But it's the best that they had at the time. So Brown was interviewed by the police on March 9th, which was the day after Sonetta's body was found. And then again on the 22nd and the 26th. On March 28th, after telling Kathy that he was tired of the police bothering him about Sonetta's murder. I don't like them bothering me. Brown packed up his clothes and he just left.
Yeah. He left Kathy holding the bag.
Yeah.
And he told Kathy to tell the police that he had been abducted by 3 men.
What now?
Dressed in black and carrying guns in a red Pinto.
Oh, no, not
That's
a Pinto. So specific. Kathy, does your husband have a pattern of specific lies like this?
So police came looking for Brown on April 1st, and Kathy told them the abduction story.
But on April 2nd, Kathy admitted that the story was not true and that she wanted to be a secret witness because she was afraid of Brown. Shout out to her using her opportunity. She told the police that Brown told her that he had killed Sonetta after they got into a fight over money. And Sonetta threatened to say that they were having an affair.
A likely story.
Mm-hmm.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
According to Kathy, Brown said that after Sonetta left the apartment, he went inside and hid in her bathroom. When she returned and changed into her night clothes, he came up behind her and wrapped a cord around her neck.
Unprovoked.
Unprovoked.
They then got into a scuffle over a knife. He took the knife away from Sonetta and stabbed her in the neck with it. Brown then kicked in the door to make it look like someone had broken into the apartment.
Well, yeah, because he was a maintenance man, so
he had a key.
He didn't want the police to know that he had gotten in with a key.
Got it. Okay.
On April 24th, Brown was arrested pursuant to a warrant, taken to the police station, and was given his Miranda rights. Brown told them the abduction story, and the police told him that they did not believe him because his wife had told them the truth, she wanted to be a secret witness, you guys.
Come on.
Fuckers.
An example of a black woman trusting the police.
Yeah.
And they fucked the
totally
trust part
screwed her
up.
over.
Because
Yeah.
if they don't indict him or hold him, she's in trouble.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just shame on that police department. But the police did not have any physical evidence. All they had was his wife's story, and Missouri law allowed for a defendant to disallow their spouse's testimony. Interesting. Even if the spouse is willing to testify. Without that evidence, the case fell apart and police let him go.
Yeah, and I don't know. It sounds like he went back and was living with Kathy again.
Yeah, but it sounds like it was... I don't know. I read the court transcripts. It sounds like it wasn't great. Yeah.
No, it wasn't great. No, not.
She went back.
It sucked.
It was very awful.
It was terrible.
Horrifying. Yeah.
The following year, on October 24th, 1986, at around 3 p.m., 9-year-old Janet Perkins left the Cole School in North St. Louis, right down the street from Brown's house on Enright Avenue. She generally took the same route each day, west on Enright Avenue, towards her home 3.5 blocks away. And under normal circumstances, the trip took less than 15 minutes.
Vernon Brown, who was still using the name Thomas Turner, had picked up his stepsons from the Cole School and returned to their home on Enright Avenue in time to see Janet walking past. Brown called her and ultimately enticed her to enter the house.
Yeah, and his stepsons knew her.
Yeah, they were friends. Oh,
Right.
They were friends. Oh, man. Ugh. This is hard.
A neighbor's relative saw Brown on the front porch and Janet walking up the steps to the house. Brown's stepson saw Janet enter the house. Brown ordered the stepsons to their bedroom and locked the door from the outside.
Yeah, right behind him. Get your asses in there. Brown took Janet to the basement of the house, and his stepsons later told jurors when they testified at trial, bravely, right, they're still kids, that they had to listen to Janet's screams through a vent, and Janet was their friend. Brown eventually strangled her to death with a rope, then dumped her body in 2 trash bags in the alley behind his house.
The next day, authorities found Janet's body in the trash bags near a dumpster in the alley behind his house. Missing was one of her shoes, her raincoat, and some school papers.
I appreciate you for not putting the details of what he did
I didn't
to her.
want that
Thank you.
in there.
Yeah, thank you. So now we're going to get into the investigation and the arrest. So the investigation raised suspicion about Brown. When suspicion turned to probable cause, then the police decided to arrest his ass on October 27th and confronted him with their evidence, including testimony of a neighbor who had seen Janet enter Brown's house.
They asked Brown to tell them where to find Janet's missing shoe, raincoat, and school papers. Brown led police to a different dumpster in which they found a bag containing Janet's missing property.
Brown made a videotape statement implicating himself as Janet's killer. Brown told police that he strangled Janet while under the influence of PCP.
In a subsequent statement, Brown also admitted to killing Sonetta Ford, claiming that she had attacked him with a knife and accidentally stabbed herself.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Brown said that around 10 a.m. on March 7th, 1985, he left home and headed for his place of work at the Grand Cafe.
Brown told police that when he arrived at work, he told the cook that he was not feeling well, and the cook told him that he could go home. Instead, Brown actually went to the apartments on Washington and then went to the basement.
He said that he saw Sonetta standing in the doorway to her apartment. According to Brown, as he walked up the stairs, she attacked him with a butcher knife.
What?
They began to tussle and ended up inside the apartment, of course.
Have you ever seen the Fast and Furious movies?
Yeah.
How they're just so preposterous.
Yeah, they're ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's
this is
what
a Fast and Furious true crime story.
Yes, that's what his fabrication is, Fast and Furious adjacent. So then as Sonetta swung the knife at him, she accidentally stabbed herself in the chest. And now, Black people are very good at telling stories, compelling ones at that. That is passed down from our ancestry. And so I feel like Vernon Brown is channeling that in his lie.
Yeah, retelling of this lie. Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy, but what a story indeed. So he said, then Sonetta swung the knife at him. He's probably like using his arms. I'm animated like I'm doing. He swung the knife, accidentally stabbed herself in the chest, and as he tried to leave, she removed the knife from her chest and attacked him a second time. Then,
okay, who's doing the PCP?
Hang on a second, officers. He grabbed the curling iron, right? I don't know where it was, but he grabbed it, and then he took this cord, and then he wrapped it around Sonetta's neck several times, and then he tied a knot in the cord.
Yeah. Okay. And while he's doing that, they wrestled, falling to the ground.
Wow.
And in their struggle, the victim stabbed herself in the throat.
Okay.
With the knife.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Likely.
Yeah. And yeah. Okay.
I don't even know what to say. This is so ridiculous.
I don't either. Yeah. Again, it's fantasy, like WWE, like, okay, brother, and then and then brother, and then
I threw a chair.
Yeah.
So he got up and left Sonetta's apartment. When he reached the top of the steps, he realized that he had left his keys inside the apartment. So he kicked in the door, went back inside, and got his keys, and then left.
Okay. Show of hands. Is this story believable?
Who believes this story?
So now let's get into the trial. On November 18th, 1986, a St. Louis City grand jury indicted Brown on 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Janet Perkins and Sonetta Ford. Brown's counsel moved to suppress the 2 videotape statements and to sever the trials on the 2 murders, so 2 separate trials. And the trial court sustained the motion to sever, but overruled the motion to suppress.
In 1987, Indianapolis prosecutors charged him with the murder of 9-year-old Kimberly Campbell, the little girl who had been murdered in 1980 and left in the home owned by Brown's grandmother. Prosecutors also charged him with molesting 4 other children.
The trial for Janet's murder began on October 17, 1988, nearly 2 years after she had been killed. Brown was convicted. During the penalty phase, Brown's stepsons testified that Brown repeatedly molested them while they were living with him. Brown was also a suspect in several other murders.
The jury recommended that Brown be put to death. The trial court concurred, entering its judgment of conviction and sentence of death on December 2nd, 1988.
In 1991, Brown was convicted for the 1985 murder of Sonetta Ford. This time, Kathy Moore's testimony was allowed because the two were not technically married due to Brown's using an alias and not terminating his prior marriage. So Brown was again sentenced to death.
And I don't know if he was ever, what is it called when they try to get you to be tried in a different state?
Extradited?
Yeah, I don't know if he was ever extradited for the murder of Kimberly Campbell. I don't know what happened with that case.
Well,
but I'm pretty sure he did it.
Yeah, it's...
I don't know why I laughed. This is all horrible, and we've talked about this before. We laugh because it's so uncomfortable.
It is, yeah. It's to keep from crying.
Yeah.
But we are in no way downplaying the harm, the loss,
the crimes. Yeah.
Yes. So now let's get into where are they now? Tell us, Beth.
Well, Vernon Brown was executed by lethal injection in Missouri on May 17th, 2005. Janet's grandmother, Susie Perkins, said that she and other family members would not attend. She said, quote, "I'm a little ill to make it, but I will be glad when it happens, when it's over with. It's taken a long time. It's finally here, so I'm glad," unquote. Sonetta's family did attend.
In the hours before his execution, Brown watched a little television and took calls from his mother and brother. His last meal was shrimp, French fries, salad, and cake.
At 11:30 p.m., Brown was strapped to the gurney. At 11:56 p.m., the Supreme Court notified the Missouri Attorney General's office of a temporary stay of execution. The issues in front of the court dealt with the constitutionality of Missouri's method of lethal injection and racial disparity in executions.
Clorox Sentiva smells like grapefruit. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut. Use as directed.
Brown's attorney had argued that the drugs used in lethal injection could cause excessive pain, citing a recent article in the Lancet Medical Journal with research, quote, showing that the 3-chemical process used by some states to carry out lethal injections has the possibility of causing unnecessary cruelty and suffering, unquote.
Brown had declined a sedative at 7 p.m., but agreed to sedation at about 1 a.m. Reportedly, he fell asleep for a while. After more than 3 hours strapped to the gurney, waiting to hear the U.S. Supreme Court's final decision on his appeal, the execution went ahead.
Brown offered no words of explanation or apology to the families of his victims. His last words were, quote, "You'll see me again. To all my friends, don't think of me as being gone, but there with you. And to Jazz, who has my heart and love, peace, love, Vernon Brown," unquote. And is Jazz the mother of his stepsons?
Nobody knows who Jazz is.
Wait a minute.
Nobody knows.
What if he just
Maybe
loved
it's just
jazz
the
music?
Yeah.
Goodbye, jazz music? What? Who is this guy? Oh my God. This is the, oh my God. I feel like I know, I'm frustrated because I feel like I know Vernon Brown and am frustrated with the Vernon Brown of it all. Sorry, Beth.
So the first drug was administered at 2:32 a.m., and Brown was pronounced dead at 2:35 a.m. He was 51, and Brown remains a suspect in 20-plus murders.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are they waiting for in terms? That seems...
Well,
DNA?
There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do anymore.
I guess.
He's dead.
All right. Well, You know what, Beth? How about you tell me what you think about this case? Fruities, you tell us what you think. You know where to find us. But Beth, you're here now.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, he, as a child, was abused and sexually assaulted. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think you have to be a genius to figure out why he got all fucked up.
Nope.
But I am so disgusted by him.
Yeah.
And I'm anti-death penalty, but if anyone deserved it, it was this guy.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah. He ruined so many lives.
Yeah.
Not just the people he killed and their families, but the children that he molested as well. And how many of them were there? There had to have been tons of them.
I think so, too, because this doesn't just happen overnight. And it sounds like he was, to me, it sounded like from reading and researching, abused by his grandfather for sport.
Right.
And hurt people, hurt other people. An explanation, as the OG of true crime says, but not an excuse.
Not an excuse.
And there are lots of hurt people who are healing and trying to break those generational curses, right? Who are doing their best to not harm other people in the process of healing.
Right.
Especially and not in such a heinous way. But Janet Perkins and Kimberly Campbell were 9-year-old girls.
Yeah.
Those are the girls' names that we know of. And Sonetta Ford was a teenager. And the court records were really helpful in me understanding the details and chronology of events.
Yeah.
But boy, they didn't hold back. And it was really hard to read about the description of the crimes and how they describe, you don't usually see this in court records, describe how the kids were harmed.
Yeah.
And we also heard from the boys' testimony how they heard another kid being harmed. And how that harmed them. And it's just so much.
It's harm after harm after harm.
Everywhere. Yeah, I just feel awful for everybody. Their stepdad invited their friend Janet into their home. And I think they thought they were going to play.
Yeah.
And he just put them in the room and locked the door right behind them. And then screams.
Yeah.
It just took me out. Yeah. And I want to commend those young boys because that took courage to tell the truth in court.
Yeah.
And go through that process. And there was, as Beth said, harm upon harm upon harm.
Yeah.
And violence, terror, evil. This is just, Brown is, I don't know what to say. I have no words. But hurting kids to me is unthinkable. It's inhuman. Like
the worst of the worst.
Yeah. And the DSM-5, I think that's the most current one today, defines pedophilic disorder as adults who have this sexual attraction to prepubescent children. And if that definition is correct, based on what we know, I agree with Beth's sort of conclusion that there's probably a lot more kids out there who were harmed. And in the United States, we have this fucked up way of treating young people who are victimized and vulnerable to this. And that's evolved from, the 70s, 80s, whatever, from indifference and carelessness and even punishing kids for being harmed in this way.
Yeah.
Like it was their fault.
Blaming them.
Yes. And we're getting better and continuing to do so. But my wish is that this just never fucking happened.
Yeah.
That the people would just leave kids alone.
Just stop it.
Yeah.
Just stop it. Yeah.
Just leave children alone. And to the loved ones who survived, my heart goes out to them because I cannot imagine a loss like this. And the difficulty of having to pick up the pieces and go on with your life and still have to live it.
Yeah.
And something that is too familiar, that I'm more familiar with as a human being who's experienced it, is crimes of sexual violence. And many humans, especially women and kids, have survived that type of violation, which personally, I have thought of it as like a murder or attempted murder of a soul.
Yeah.
And other victims may describe it completely differently and totally okay. But if you're like left to pick up the pieces and figure out what the fuck happened to you and how to exist in this world with not a lot of help.
Yeah.
And the resources probably not what they are today.
Yeah.
So not much for the victims, but the system looks at, convictions and arrests as justice. And that might not ring true for the people who are still here.
Who are victimized, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this was just really sad. Just sad. So my
really
heart goes out to anybody touched by this case.
Yeah.
So let us know your takes.
Beth, where can the people find us?
Our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use Fruit Loops Pod for all of our social media.
This is a weekly podcast, and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.
I'm an American vigilante. I have a question for you. What would you do if someone you cared about was abducted, taken from you? Would you call me? Would you care about how I got them back? Download American Vigilante now.
Hi, I'm Matt Harris. Seton Tucker and I host the podcast Impact of Influence, which for 2 years covered in depth Alec Murdaugh, who was eventually convicted in 2023 of murdering his wife Maggie and son Paul. That story continues to evolve, and we will cover that. Plus, we will tell you stories of other true crime events that have happened in the South. Please join us on Impact of Influence. And give us a follow on the Impact of Influence Facebook page.